Hello and welcome to our first episode of Property Investing Today with your host Howard Bowes and myself, Grant Paul Adams. This is the video podcast that helps you to get to that next step with your property portfolio and help build your own empire. So today we're looking at the big subject topic of auction properties. Now, if you haven't bought at auction before, it can be quite an intimidating process. So Howard and I are going to talk you through our 3 or 4 major tips for buying at auction and selling at auction. Howard, I suppose first of all, why is now such a good time to be buying at auction?
There's great opportunities at the auction, Grant, as you know, because right now there's a little period of uncertainty, and when there's uncertainty, it definitely creates opportunity. I mean, I think, as you know, that any time is great to buy at auction. I've sold more properties at auction than I bought, but I've done both. I've sold and I've bought. So right now, what we're seeing is that people are offloading property, they're putting property into the auctions, they're redressing their portfolio. Some people who've got developments are concerned about developing, worried about what might happen over the next 18 months. And as a result of that, they're sort of offloading those property deals. But actually, I think it's a great time, as long as you price those deals right, to jump in, buy and develop. So we are, just this week, I've negotiated another auction purchase, which is the development of 12 flats.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting for us all for the next sort of couple of months.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So another busy one. And that's the first property I've bought from an auction for a couple of years. But yeah, I've sold, as you know, quite a few at auction recently, because leading up till now, the market has been frenzied. And there's been so much activity out there with people buying that, in fact, we were able to buy properties from a regular estate agent, putting in a cheeky offer, perhaps when there was a chain break on a residential property, and then put it into an auction and make a profit.
Exactly. Yeah. And none of us want to be in property for not making a profit at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah, isn't that the truth? So to go through some tips, I think there's 2 sides of this, and I think we should deal with both sides. So
absolutely.
It's the buying and the selling. In terms of buying from auction, I think that some of the key tips really is that people ask, should I buy before, during, or post auction?
Yeah, and also what are the implications with that? Because I think people forget that just because you're buying maybe pre or post auction time frame, some of those auction thought processes, fees, and the process itself comes into play at every element of that, doesn't it?
Exactly, and it's the terms and conditions of the auction and your ability to negotiate them.
Yeah.
So herein lies a classic example. I've done all 3. I've bought before, I've bought during, and I've bought after auction. One of the things I like about before auction is if people are a little bit, if the seller's a little bit worried or the seller is motivated to sell, then sometimes you can get it pulled from the auction, and you don't necessarily do that because you think you're going to get it cheaper.
Yeah.
So in my classic example here, the one that I'm buying now, it's got planning, it's a development deal for a group of apartments, and I could probably get that deal. I don't think it's going to hit the reserve price in the auction, but I've agreed to pay what I think is the reserve price for the property to pull it out early. But I said, look, I'll complete early. We'll exchange now. Sorry, not complete early. We'll exchange now, so you get the commitment. But I want 56 days.
Right. Big difference with that.
Exactly. So it's in an auction where, the terms and conditions say 28 days. Now, if I bid in the room, or as we used to say, bid in the room, but of course now it would be bid online. But if I bid online during the auction, then I've confirmed that I'm going to buy to those auction terms. I can't negotiate after I've won.
Exactly.
So what I've done in this instance is I've said, look, I'll give you that early exchange, so you've got the certainty. I'm not going to bid at auction. I'll be walking away.
Yep.
But if you accept my bid now, we'll exchange now. But what I'm looking for is 56 days, not 28. So I've got double the time frame to get my ducks in a row.
Yeah, and that makes a big difference, because I think with a lot of auctions that we see, the very standard at least is usually 21 or 28 days. And that is not a huge amount of time to get everything done, is it? But if you have that power to negotiate up front, assuming that the seller allows it as well, that can give you much more flexibility to ensure that the finance is in place, any agreements are in place with with partners within the company, etc. It does give you that ability to build something that's more on your terms and more favourable to yourself, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot to do. So in this example, although the property's got planning, there are some pre-commencement conditions the council have put down that we have to run past the council. So the great thing is we've exchanged this week and we're able to start that process knowing we're committed to the purchase. But of course, we're going to be taking development finance.
Yeah.
And the clock's not ticking on my interest whilst I'm getting as much of that paperwork done as I possibly can so that we can get clearance on those key details, the roof, the windows, some other pieces that the council want finalised.
Especially in an area like Newport in this particular instance, because it is a very historic town and planning rules can be quite specific in those sort of areas. So are you finding that's going to be more of a challenge leading up to that sort of official exchange, as it were?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think whenever you're doing a development, whether you're buying from auction or not, you need to really understand how the council work and what timeframes those councils are on. So, and some councils are better than others. So one of my favourite examples of this is in the same month in 2020, I bought a property that was in one council and I bought a property that's in another council.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, and we went through the planning. So neither of these buildings had planning. We bought them, but it was speculative. We knew we'd get planning. We understood the LDP, the local development plan for both councils. But we went for planning for nothing too ambitious, but something that really worked and was a good profit on the buildings. The one building, as you know, we bought. We got planning, we got all the QS reports, the MS reports and ME reports, everything else that was needed, and then sold that building in an auction and made a healthy profit on it.
I also remember that.
Yeah, and did all that in a 14-month period.
Yeah.
24 months down the line, I've only just met the planning requirements and the feedback from the pre-planning application on the council for the other building. So bought in the same month, one in and out in 14, the other one only just got to planning in 25 months. So that's the difference between different councils. You've got to understand that. And something else that we love, and a topic for another one of our podcasts, is going to be auction. Is going to be grade 2 listed buildings. So this building's grade 2 listed. I'm not afraid of grade 2 listed, but it does mean you have a few extra hoops to jump through.
Yeah. And I think especially at a time when people are trying to find an actual deal, with mortgage rates going up, with bridging rates going up, with stress testing being quite crucial at the moment, understanding the type of property that you're building and the terms that you're buying it for isn't necessarily that straightforward, is it? Like you said, knowing the councils, knowing how the planning is going to work could be vital in getting that over the line. But understanding that up front is quite key as well.
Yeah, exactly. And look, the whole thing is key. And I think for the property investors that are out there right now that have been doing the typical buy, refurb, refinance of a typical terrace type house or a semi-detached house, price range for their area geographically where they're investing, those days are numbered. If you're an investor that's been in that market, unfortunately it's time to grow up. It's time to get to the next level.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so buying from auction is part of that process. Buying that quirky stuff, the problem stuff, the commercial to resi development potential stuff, that's the market that's going to be exciting moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think it is time for everybody, wherever they're based in the UK, across Europe, or in the Middle East, where we've got a lot of clients as well. I think rethinking that process and strategy could be really key and actually really beneficial at the moment as well, given where things are. But with all of that in mind, what would you say are your 3 main tips if you're selling at auction? What things do you have to consider in order to make it as successful as it can be?
Yeah, so I think from if you're selling auction, which as you know I've done, then the market that I'm looking for when I sell at auction is perhaps the developer that wants to go straight in with no hassle. They want, on the purchase side, the speed and certainty.
Yeah.
And so what we find is most of the sales I've done in auction are where I've bought something speculatively I've got planning on it. I've perhaps produced the QS report so they've got all the costings. And especially if I can make those costings keen and show where we can make cost savings, then I've put it into the auction with all those reports. And so what I'm looking for, what I'm marketing to, is a developer that wants to just sweep in, buy quickly and get on with the development, because I've done all the prep work for them. And that's proved a very profitable strategy for me. So first of all, when I'm selling at auction, my first tip is that legal pack is not just the basics of a legal pack.
Yeah, crucial.
I use my legal pack as a sales pitch for the property, and we put extra stuff in there. If we've got a really strong GDV from a RICS surveyor confirmed, I'll put that valuation report in my legal pack.
Yeah.
Why not show them how certain that deal can be if you've made it that certain?
Yes, in a time of uncertainty, that is one of the best things you can absolutely do, and it provide that certainty so you know it's a good deal.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, and putting the costings in, putting the schedule of works in, you know, so all of that stuff goes into the legal pack so it can be downloaded by the buyer. Now, they may want to make their own changes, but the point is they've got that level of information that is way beyond a basic legal pack.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is a really key factor for any auction purchase or any auction sell as well, making sure that legal pack is in line and making sure it works for you. So got the legal pack sorted. What else would you say is critical when you're selling at auction?
So one of the things that we do is as well as the legal pack being that kind of sales pitch, if you like, also making sure the legal pack is there in plenty of time. So many auction properties, it comes in at the last minute. And when it comes in at the last minute, you know, it's giving people less time to prepare and less confidence. Typically in the market, with my over 20 years experience, a property investor is expecting a legal pack to have some hidden problems if it comes in late.
Yeah.
So there's an extra dubiousness about a late legal pack. So get the legal pack in early, as we said, and get it as a sales pitch. The other thing that we do, of course, having the infrastructure that we've got at Harvey Bowes, is that we have our own property manager attend the open viewing days.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we get to scope out, you know, who those potential buyers are for the property on the open days. But I never go myself because I don't want to answer any awkward questions. I don't necessarily want people to have that access to me individually.
Yeah,
but you know, but we want to have access to them. So what we're looking for is we're looking for, you know, who's in the room, who is interested in our property. So, you know, that's a key. Getting it listed with the auction house early is another good tip, and making sure that the auction house have as much information that they want, so that their representatives, their negotiators, their auctioneers are confident in the product that we're selling through their auction.
Yeah, because they're going to need to have that same level of certainty that you would be as a seller. Otherwise, you know, where's the confidence in that property, and where's the love for that property? No one else is going to share it if the people that are key to that sell are not going to be all in at the same time. So again, it makes complete sense.
Exactly. And look, another one for those top key sort of tips is just as we've said earlier in this, is 56 days. So you don't have to offer 28 days. If you extend that period, and some of the auction houses, one of the auction houses in Bristol has started offering 56 days as standard instead of 28.
Interesting.
And I think that's a way, not just because lenders at the moment are a little bit slower, but it just gives people the extra confidence they can get their ducks in a row in the time frame. They've still got the speed and certainty of purchase because you've exchanged contracts.
Exactly.
You've still got the speed and certainty of sale because you've exchanged contracts, but you've just allowed that extra little bit of time. If you put that on the table, people will be a little bit more confident about bidding.
Exactly. And we've done enough auctions at Harvey Bowes over the years to know that 28 days, even though that is very standard, that can be a real trial for a lot of people because it doesn't give a lot of time. And if you've got a 56-day completion as standard with some of the auction houses, like you mentioned in Bristol, that opens up more opportunity. Obviously, you don't want to get resting on your laurels, do you, at that stage? Because there's nothing worse than leaving it to the last minute. However, you're exactly right. It just gives you a bit more flexibility. And if you can negotiate that point up front, that can be really good. Obviously, you can't negotiate mid-sale if it's going through the auction, but at least you've got some flexibility either side of doing that.
Exactly. And you know, a few of the things we've done, so flipping it round perhaps to buying at auction as well.
Yeah.
Then with the buying at auction, you know, when you're buying before, during, after, you know, there have been times when we had live auctions, I was sat in the room and I'd be sat on my hands because I wanted to buy a property.
Yeah.
But if I can't scope out another genuine bidder, if I don't see hands raising for somebody else buying that property, then I might try and buy it post-auction when it hasn't sold, when the vendor's deflated, and I can come in with a sniper post offer, and again negotiate maybe an extra time period or something else alongside it. So I think that's quite interesting to do. But also, if I think there's interest, we might go before auction, like we have with this latest purchase.
Yeah.
In terms of buying at auction, then as well, you know, like we say, before auction, post auction, you've got the ability to negotiate around that contract.
Yes.
Also, you know, you need to be prepared with a legal pack. I'd also be going to every one of the open day viewings, or at least sending someone from my team to every one.
Yeah, rather than buying completely blind.
Well, yeah, and scoping out the competition. Who else?
Good point.
Who else is looking at that particular property? Who could I potentially be bidding against?
Yeah, and I suppose in the same sort of measure, you want to avoid being in that scenario where you're in a bidding war, because I think we've seen it in the past where people have set their figure at this, and then they've got a bit caught up in the moment. Someone else is sort of throwing their 2 pence in, and then all of a sudden they've gone so over budget. Luckily, in the instances where I've seen that, we've seen the deal still work, but that's not always going to be the case. So I guess if you know who is in the market for that same property, and you know the property as well, that again is going to give you that confidence to make sure that the deal makes sense.
Exactly. And look, I think that was a great tip you had there as well, is the deal's going to make sense, and you know, you need a ceiling on your bid price.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And don't get carried away. One of the other things that we find is discussed a lot on social media about auctions, and a lot of mortgage brokers out there saying you can't get a mortgage on a property you're buying at auction. What are your thoughts on that, Graham?
That's a really interesting one, because I think we've seen, well, again, at Harvey Bowes, we've definitely seen this on both sides of the table. I would be more inclined to do short-term finance, because generally a lot of the deals that we see that go to auction require something specific happening to the property. Some of them might have had structural issues, some of them might need a major refurb, some of them might need a complete refurb, others might want splitting of titles or things like that, which may take a bit longer, but you will need quite quick finance. But you know, we've seen it, we've been able to prove it as well with lenders like Birmingham Midshires at one point in time, that you could do an auction purchase directly on a mortgage. I think once upon a time we even did it with Kent Reliance. So it's absolutely possible. I think what people need to remember is that the time frame needs to work, and they need to do their due diligence up front, just as we would. Because yes, in theory you can do it on a mortgage, but I think equally, if I was to make the assumption and not check it out first, could leave someone in a bit of an expensive area of inflexibility. So like with every deal that we do, and we run through pretty much every deal ourselves amongst us as well, don't we? But if I knew that something had a 56-day completion, the property was habitable and the legal pack didn't show any issues, then I would always reach out to the lender, explain the situation, see what their timeframes are like, see if it's feasible, but also to make sure that the solicitor that they wanted to use could also do the turnaround in the same time. Because I think if you've got those factors up front, at least it gives you that confidence in knowing that you could move forward with that strategy, assuming that all of the pieces fall into place. But you know, again, that's where the legal pack comes into it and really helps with that speed, because we're, you know, as buyers, as sellers, we're used to solicitors taking several weeks to get things done, not due to any sort of lackluster of approach. It's purely down to process, of course. But with a legal pack, that does give you essentially a completed set of legals, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people forget, because that's what makes it possible to do it on a mortgage, because the legal side can be done quite quickly. Imagine you could get to offer in 3 or 4 weeks, which we know historically has been possible. Having that legal process in the background, having, you know, all of that work done there, they just need to liaise with the lender. Again, opens up much cheaper borrowing as well.
Exactly. And that's the key. So as you said, if the legal pack is complete and comprehensive and answers the questions that the lender's going to want to know, then you are able to process a habitable property and get a mortgage done in the time frame. I mean, I've seen on your LinkedIn profile a testimonial from someone that I think you had their offer on the table in before 21 days, let alone the full 28. You were something like 10 days early.
My very first bridge as well.
Fantastic, yeah, great stuff. But so it's entirely possible to do that. Like you say, at Harvey Bowes, we've done mortgages with Kent Reliance. When their service levels are good, some of the lenders will actually prioritise something they know is an auction purchase.
They will, especially if you work with the account manager or what we would call the BDM up front, so that they know, because they can then sort of stick their hand in to make sure that things run smoothly for that client. Exactly.
So it is entirely possible. And if you're going to do a light refurb, of course, there are some lenders that will allow a light refurb and then allow you to go back for a further advance. So much cheaper borrowing than on a bridge. However, we do many auction purchases, financing them for our clients, and generally what we find, of course, is that they go down the bridging route. Because it is safer, it is speedier, and if there are some holes in the legal pack, a bridging lender can take a view on that, whereas a lender may not.
That's where the human element comes in, and we work with some amazing short-term finance lenders, bridging lenders, development lenders, where they have people that actually look at each case. It isn't a computerized system, things don't get lost in the background. They actively look at them and try to take that view, as you said, based on the level of risk that they've got, but also on how much the deal makes sense. We're only going to put a deal with a lender if we know that the two parties are congruent with each other, which makes a lot more sense. And I think if they're able to look at it and see things from what they could be, rather than, no, well, that's not what it says in our criteria, can't do that. It makes more sense, doesn't it? And it opens up that flexibility again, which is kind of crucial.
Exactly. And I think to that end, you want to use a broker that's experienced at doing auction purchases, of course, if you're looking to fund, but also, for property investors, they've got to use the right solicitor.
Oh, hugely. That is probably one of the biggest factors in getting it over the line in the time frame.
Yeah, let's be fair. If you're going to use a solicitor that's great at doing the ping-pong conveyancing that you need for a Santander buy-to-let mortgage, and you're doing a commercial to resi conversion, buying from auction, you are using the wrong lawyer.
Completely.
You've got to use the right lawyer. The lawyer's got to understand how the bridging lenders work and has got to be able to speak their language.
Absolutely. The communication side of that is absolutely key, isn't it? And I think this is why doing as much due diligence up front as you can makes sense, because if you just go out on a wing and a prayer and hope that a solicitor can do it, what happens if they're not happy with doing bridging? What happens if they can't service in that time frame? Or maybe they've got bad service levels due to staff sickness, as we've seen for the last 3 years. All of these things really need to be factored in, don't they? And I think that's why, if you're doing anything at auction, doing it up front, so trying to get the financing up front first of all, seeing what lenders would be happy and could give you the money you need, maybe even the works money in a lot of instances, but making sure they can turn around in that time frame is just as important as making sure your solicitor can complete in that time. So I always recommend people would do that. Speak to the solicitor that they want to use. If they can't do it, who's the plan B, who's the plan C? Making sure they've got someone that really understands it, really makes sense to be used, and can actually physically do it in the first place. Auction doesn't give you a lot of time to negotiate errors of timing, does it? So it makes absolute sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about that subject then, about timing. What happens when it goes wrong? So not many people I've found actually understand the process when you buy from auction. And it's not really spoken about very much. So let's explore it now. So if you buy at auction, you've exchanged contracts, and of course I'm talking about a traditional auction here, not one of these modern methods of auction where you're not exchanged contracts at all. Actually, it's a complete farce, most of them.
It's almost like eBay.
Exactly, yeah, it's almost like eBay. So let's talk about real auction purchases. You've exchanged contracts. And as soon as you've exchanged contracts, whether it's, I've seen as little as 14 days, 21 days, 28 days, 56 days, whatever that completion date is, you are due to complete on that day further down the line. So you've exchanged, you've got the completion coming up, you're getting your ducks in a row, and things just aren't ready. Few things have gone wrong. Maybe the bridging lenders asked for some extra surveys that you hadn't spotted. There was subsidence, but those type of problems.
Yes. How many times have we seen that happen?
Yeah. So when that happens, if you haven't got those ducks in a row, then basically the best thing to do is to talk to your solicitor, get your solicitor to talk to the seller's solicitor and say, look, for these reasons, we need more time. Now, if you go over the date of completion, it doesn't mean you've lost your deposit. That is a myth.
And it's what everybody believes as well.
Exactly, but it's not the case. What the law basically states in simple terms is the seller's solicitor, the vendor solicitor, has to issue you with a notice period. So you get a 10-day notice period, and you pay interest on the money outstanding during that time. And if after the 10 days you've not been able to complete, they can then take your deposit, cancel your sale, rescind the contract, and go and sell to somebody else. Now, what makes it worse is if they sell to somebody else and they sell at a loss, a provable loss, there is case law to say they can come after you for the difference.
Right, okay.
So you could have
the plot thickens.
The plot thickens. You could be ending up to compensate. But the key thing is, if you miss the completion date by a couple of days, you're within your 10-day notice period, but also they've got to serve you notice. So if it takes them 3 days to serve you notice, you've actually got a 13-day extension.
So it's from the point that they issue that notice rather than from the date of the assumed completion.
Correct, yes.
Big difference.
I've been reliably informed by a solicitor that I use a lot on this, that it is the date they can prove that the notice has been served. So if you look at, generally when a court is issuing papers, they state what the date for deadlines are, and then they allow another 5 to 7 days for issue. Now, I have known some clients who have not been able to complete on the date to have been served notice in their hand by a courier. Then there's proof that they've had that notice.
Yes.
If the notice is sent by email, then obviously it's traceable. We've also known the notice to be sent by post, and then what is 10 days is kind of dubious if it's sent by post. So
absolutely,
probably got a little bit extra, but you don't want to get into those 10 days. It's pretty stressful. So it's only there as an absolute contingency.
I think the main thing about that, though, is the idea that things don't work perfectly to time every time. I would love to say that every auction I've done has been straightforward, quick and easy. Auctions aren't an easy thing to work with because you've constantly got that ticking in the background, knowing that the time is moving quickly. You know, we only have to work in this environment for longer than a month to realise that the weeks move quicker than we anticipate them doing. But I think just knowing and having that confidence in, if everything didn't go to plan, you've got that extra period. I would definitely say you should never rest on your laurels with that, because there's no guarantee, is there, that they're going to grant that extra 10 days. But at least you know that you have that as a fail-safe. So if something did go wrong, if a document needed re-signing, if a survey came up, you know, which happens, especially on auction properties, or if there was a special requirement that needed looking into by the solicitors, then at least you know you've got that extra buffer in the background. A small buffer, but at least you know you've got it there. And I think that's quite a big selling point sometimes, isn't it? Just to give you confidence.
100%, absolutely. And then, you know, let's discuss that chicken and egg scenario as well about when do you get your reports done? Well, if you go to an open day, get to the first open day if you can, because then you can go to the other open days, okay? Also find out if the auctioneers will give you other viewing times, other access, because they may if you're going to take some professionals in to look at a property. So, you know, ask the question. You don't have to only go on the open days. But get to that first open day. You know, if you haven't got a lot of experience, take a more experienced property investor or your builder with you.
Yeah, same as buying a car.
Yeah, exactly. And let them just point out, you know, look, there could be a damp problem here. There could be this. So if you're serious about buying, you think you've got a strong bid, then you've got to make up your mind whether you'll then take in maybe at cost someone to do a damp survey, you know, a structural engineer just to look at those cracks in the building.
Yeah.
You know, so it depends on your level of experience. What I've always done is try to mobilize my team. And again, even if I'm gonna bid at the auction, a lot of times sniper bidding's great. But if I'm worried about a property and I'm gonna be bidding at the auction, I'll tell the auctioneers, look, I'm gonna be bidding. I want to put forward a fairly strong bid. But what I'm really going to need is access to that property 2 or 3 times between the bid, winning the bid, exchanging contracts, so I am committed, in other words, and completion, because I've got to get some specialist reports done.
Exactly. And you are an experienced property investor, property developer, experienced at auctions, experienced in finance, but you're not a structural surveyor.
Exactly.
You're not an electrician, are you? So you kind of need these things really to ensure that the deal's going to work as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about communication. Whether you get your reports done prior to bidding or whether you bid and then get some of those specialist reports done afterwards is down to 2 things really, your level of confidence and your level of risk.
Absolutely. Every single time.
Yeah.
So I think that's covered off a huge amount about auction purchases. And again, for anyone that's interested in looking into auctions, it's a good opportunity to speak to us or to speak to you. Look at that mentoring side as well, if they're really concerned about buying at auction, how they buy it, how they make the property what they need, and then how they ultimately refinance it, and learning more about their strategy. Have you got any other points that you want to raise before we finish for today, or do you sort of feel like that's given everybody enough to certainly get their teeth stuck into and get to grips with?
Yeah, exactly. Look, there's so much we can talk about with buying from auctions, and it's individual to each person's prospective property, their attitude to risk, as we said.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is to get in touch, right? So, and we can help. Let's just review how we can help. So first of all, we are known for sorting out the finance, and of course we can. We can arrange the buy-to-let mortgages, the development finance, the bridging finance, auction finance, purchase finance. We can do that. That's no problem. But you don't just use us for that if you want to use us for more. So we're here on a consultative basis. I work on a consultative basis for several people. We've just had one now where I looked at something that already had planning, and we were able to reduce the build cost by nearly £80,000 just by picking out some tips.
That was a very rewarding phone call.
Exactly. So, there's a wealth of experience in Harvey Bowes. We're an expert team. Use us as your experts. That's our bottom line.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. So, I hope you've all enjoyed that and taken something away on auctions today. Whether you're buying, whether you're selling, that's definitely given you some grounding that you can work with. Thanks in particular to Howard for going through that with us. We'll be back very shortly with some more content for you and some new ways that you can continue to build that property portfolio as you move forward. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and subscribe to Harvey Bowes TV. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook, and you can contact us via the details at the end of this video podcast. Until next time, we look forward to seeing you then. Take care.
Looking to purchase a property for investment or development? Look no further. At Harvey Bowes, we pride ourselves in finding ways to make complex and niche deals work. Making sure to explore all the possible strategies and matching the right financing structure to the needs of each investor. Contact Harvey Bowes today. Property finance by investors, for investors.